The cold void of space stretched endlessly around Hasel 7, a tiny mining station clinging to an asteroid like a metal barnacle. Inside the dimly lit maintenance bay, Dae-hyun checked his suit seals one more time before stepping into the airlock. Another repair job. Another day of fixing things that broke faster than he could weld them back together. He had been working on this remote station for 3 years now. Most people couldn't handle the isolation, but Dae-hyun preferred it. Out here, nobody asked questions about his past. Nobody wanted to talk about families or losses or the things that kept him awake at night. Just him, his tools, and the endless quiet of space. The exterior hull needed patches again. Micrometeorites had torn through the protective plating near Docking Bay 3. Dae-hyun activated his magnetic boots and stepped out onto the asteroid's surface. Earth hung somewhere far behind him, a distant memory of crowds and noise and a younger sister who smiled too much and trusted too easily. He pushed the thought away and focused on his work. The welding torch sparked to life, painting bright orange streaks across the darkness. Minutes blended together in the rhythmic dance of repairs. Weld check, move forward. Weld check, move forward. This was his life now, and he had made peace with it. The scanner on his wrist beeped. Dae-hyun frowned. Something metallic was lodged in the ice field about 200 meters from his position, probably debris from a passing freighter. Station protocol required him to log all foreign objects. He sighed and began the slow walk across the asteroid's surface. The ice glittered under his helmet lights as he approached. What he had assumed was debris turned out to be a small escape pod, half buried in frozen water. The design was strange, nothing like human engineering. Smooth curves and organic-looking metal spoke of alien manufacture. Dae-hyun's heart rate picked up. Finding alien technology this far into human space was unusual and potentially dangerous. He circled the pod carefully. No markings. No identification codes. The hull was damaged, scarred by what looked like weapons fire. Someone had been running from something and they hadn't wanted to be found. Dae-hyun knew he should report this immediately. Protocol was clear. But something made him hesitate. A small window on the pod's side showed movement inside. Dae-hyun pressed his helmet closer, shining his light through the frosted glass. His breath caught. A tiny creature lay curled in the pod's interior, barely moving. It had fur the color of midnight, small limbs tucked against its body, and a face that might have been cute if it wasn't so obviously dying. Dae-hyun recognized the species from mandatory xenobiology training. Vreneth, the galaxy's apex predators. The warrior race that had conquered dozens of star systems before humans even left their solar system. They were feared across known space, respected even by species that hated them. And here was one of their cubs, abandoned and alone. His training screamed at him to walk away. Vreneth were dangerous even as children. Their empire had strict laws about their young. Taking one could mean war, execution, or worse. But as Dae-hyun stared at the tiny, struggling creature, all he could see was his sister. Helpless. Abandoned by those who should have protected her. He made his decision in seconds. The pod's emergency release was easy to trigger. Ancient safety protocols worked across species lines. The hatch hissed open, releasing stale air that had probably kept the cub alive for days, maybe weeks. Dae-hyun reached inside carefully. The cub was so small, fitting easily in his arms even through his bulky suit. She didn't resist. Barely conscious, she simply went limp against him. Getting back to the station with his secret cargo took careful planning. Dae-hyun entered through the maintenance access tunnels, bypassing the main airlocks where sensors would log his entry. His quarters were small but private, far from the common areas. He laid the cub on his bed and finally got a good look at her. She was beautiful in an alien way. Midnight blue fur covered her small body, darker than space itself. Small bone ridges ran along her spine, not yet fully developed. Her face was delicate, almost cat-like, but with subtle differences that marked her as something far more dangerous. 4 limbs, each tipped with retractable claws, a long tail wrapped around her body for warmth. She couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Dae-hyun pulled up every file he could find on Vreneth biology. They were carnivores, obligate hunters with complex nutritional needs. Their cubs required specific proteins and minerals. Station rations wouldn't work, but the medical bay had synthesizers for xenobiological emergencies. He would have to be creative. Over the next week, Dae-hyun became an expert in keeping secrets. He requisitioned food under false maintenance reports. He studied Vreneth physiology during his off hours. He converted his small quarters into a makeshift habitat, keeping the temperature high and the lighting low. The cub remained unconscious for 3 days, and Daehyun began to fear she wouldn't make it. On the 4th day, she stirred. Small chirping sounds came from her throat as she searched for food. Daehyun offered her the protein mixture he had synthesized, holding the container close. She latched on weakly, drinking with desperate hunger. Relief flooded through him. She was going to survive. He named her Mirai. It meant future in his language, and somehow it felt right. This tiny creature represented something beyond the endless cycle of repairs and loneliness. She was a reason to wake up, a purpose beyond simply existing. Mirai grew stronger each day. Her eyes opened on the 7th day, brilliant amber that locked onto Daehyun with startling intelligence. She made soft sounds whenever he entered the room, her tail twitching with what might have been happiness. Daehyun found himself talking to her, explaining his work, reading from old books he had brought from Earth. She listened with focused attention, her head tilting at unfamiliar words. The station supervisor, Jiwon, noticed his changed behavior. She had worked on HFY 7 for 15 years, and nothing escaped her attention. Daehyun became paranoid about his routines. He varied his food requisitions. He stopped socializing completely, which wasn't unusual for him but still drew some curiosity. He installed a basic security system in his quarters. Nothing fancy but enough to warn him if anyone approached. 3 weeks after finding Mirai, Daehyun sat on his floor watching her explore the small space. She was more active now, pouncing on loose bolts and investigating every corner with kitten-like curiosity. But there was something more in her movements, a predatory grace that reminded him what she would become. Vreneth adults stood over 2 meters tall, could tear through steel with their claws, and lived by a warrior code that valued strength above all else. What was he doing? Keeping this creature here was insane. She would grow. She would become dangerous. Eventually someone would find out, and then what? Death for him. Probably death for everyone on the station. The Vreneth Empire didn't forgive insults to their species. Mirai approached him, making soft chirping sounds. She pressed her small head against his hand, seeking comfort. Her amber eyes looked up at him with complete trust. In that moment, Daehyun understood that he had already made his choice. Weeks ago when he decided to open that pod, maybe even years ago when he failed to save his sister and swore he would never be helpless again. He scooped Mirai into his arms. She purred, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through her small body. "I don't know what I'm doing," Daehyun whispered to her. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." Mirai chirped softly and closed her eyes, falling asleep in his arms. Outside his quarters, the station continued its endless routine. But inside this small room, something had changed. A maintenance engineer and an alien cub, bonded by circumstance and choice, beginning a journey that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. 6 months had passed since Daehyun found the escape pod. Mirai had grown rapidly, now reaching the size of a large dog. Her midnight blue fur had deepened in color, almost black in dim light but shimmering with subtle purple highlights under bright illumination. The bone ridges along her spine had become more pronounced, marking her transition from infant to juvenile. She moved with fluid grace, her predatory nature becoming more apparent with each passing day. Daehyun's quarters had transformed into something between a workshop and a habitat. He had requisitioned extra panels to expand the space, claiming he needed storage for equipment. The walls now held climbing structures made from scrap metal and cargo netting. Mirai spent hours exploring these additions, her natural agility allowing her to leap and climb with breathtaking precision. The most remarkable change was her intelligence. Mirai understood both Korean and English now, responding to commands and questions with chirps, growls, and body language. She couldn't speak, not with her throat structure, but she communicated clearly. When Daehyun asked if she was hungry, she would move to her feeding area. When he told her to hide, she would vanish into the hidden compartment he had built behind his sleeping area. He taught her everything he knew, not fighting or hunting, the traditional skills of her species, but problem-solving and engineering. He showed her how machines worked, how systems connected, how to think through complex challenges. Mirai absorbed the lessons with eager focus, often figuring out solutions before Daehyun finished explaining the problem. In the evenings, he read to her from his sister's old books. Stories of heroes who protected others, of courage that came from compassion rather than violence, of strength used to build rather than destroy. Mirai would curl up beside him, her amber eyes fixed on his face as he read, her tail wrapped around his arm. But keeping secrets on a small station was becoming impossible. The other workers noticed Daehyun's strange behavior. His food requisitions had tripled. He spent all his free time in his quarters. Strange sounds occasionally echoed through the ventilation systems. The questions were starting casual at first, but growing more pointed. Jiwon was the one who finally confronted him. She appeared at his door late one evening, after most of the crew had gone to sleep. Daehyun's security system alerted him seconds before she knocked. He managed to get Mirai into her hiding spot, but the young Vreneth protested with soft growls. "We need to talk," Jiwon said when he opened the door. Her expression was serious, the kind of look that meant no more games. She had been running this station longer than anyone, and nothing happened here without her knowledge. Daehyun considered lying, but Jiwon pushed past him into the quarters before he could speak. She stopped in the middle of the room, her eyes scanning the modifications, the climbing structures, the oversized feeding bowls. Her hand moved to her communicator and Daehyun's heart dropped. A low growl came from behind the wall panels. Mirai had sensed his distress and was reacting to the potential threat. Jiwon froze, her hand hovering over the communicator. The growl deepened, resonating through the room with a subsonic rumble that made the walls vibrate. "Show me," Jiwon said quietly. "Whatever you're hiding, show me now before this gets worse." Daehyun had no choice. He called to Mirai in Korean, his voice gentle despite his racing heart. The panel slid aside and Mirai emerged into the light. She stood protectively in front of Daehyun, her body low and ready, her amber eyes fixed on Jiwon with predatory intensity. Jiwon took 3 steps back, her face going pale. "That's a Vreneth," she whispered. "You're keeping a Vreneth cub on my station. Do you have any idea what this means? If the Empire finds out, they'll kill every person here. They'll destroy the entire station as a message." "She was dying," Daehyun said simply. "I found her in an escape pod. Someone had abandoned her, left her to die in the cold. They're predators," Jiwon continued, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "They don't bond with other species. They don't show mercy or compassion. That creature will grow up and tear you apart the moment her instincts kick in." As if to contradict her words, Mirai moved back to Daehyun's side. She pressed against his leg, still watching Jiwon but no longer aggressive. A soft chirp came from her throat, and she looked up at Daehyun as if seeking reassurance. Jiwon watched this interaction with visible confusion. She shouldn't be doing that. Vreneth cubs are raised in warrior creches. They're trained to be independent, aggressive, dominant. This one acts like she's bonded to you. "She is," Daehyun said. "I raised her, fed her, taught her. She imprinted on me as her parent." The supervisor was quiet for a long moment. She studied Mirai with the careful attention of someone who had survived on the frontier, by reading situations accurately. The young Vreneth stared back, no longer threatening but clearly protective of Daehyun. "This can't last," Jiwon finally said. "She's growing fast. In another 6 months, she'll be too big to hide. Someone will find out, and when they do, we're all dead." "I know," Daehyun admitted. The weight of that knowledge had been crushing him for weeks. "But I can't give her up. She trusts me. She's not like what everyone says about her species. She's gentle, curious, caring." Jiwon sighed deeply. "You're going to get us all killed. You know that, right?" But she didn't reach for her communicator. Instead, she sat down heavily on Daehyun's bunk. "Show me what you've taught her." Over the next hour, Daehyun demonstrated Mirai's abilities. How she could solve complex mechanical puzzles. How she responded to commands and questions. How she had learned to control her strength after accidentally breaking equipment. How she showed genuine concern when Daehyun was tired or hurt. Jiwon watched it all with growing amazement. "I've studied Vreneth for years," she said. "Required reading for anyone working near their space. Everything I know says this shouldn't be possible. They're warriors, conquerors. They respect only strength and dominance. Maybe that's because nobody ever tried raising them differently," Daehyun suggested. "Maybe they become what they're taught to become." Before Jiwon could respond, the station's alert system activated. Red lights flashed through the corridors, and an automated voice announced incoming traffic. A ship was approaching HFY 7 requesting permission to dock. The identity transponder marked it as Vreneth military. The blood drained from Daehyun's face. Jiwon jumped to her feet, pulling up the communication on her portable display. A Vreneth patrol ship, the Crimson Talon, claiming routine inspection of border territories. They would arrive within hours. "Hide her," Jiwon ordered. Hide her now and don't come out until I give the all clear. If they find her, we're done. Daehyun didn't need to be told twice. He gathered Mirai into the hidden compartment, crawling in with her. The space was cramped, barely big enough for both of them, but it was shielded from most sensor scans. Mirai sensed his fear and pressed close, her warmth a small comfort in the dark. The next hours were torture. Daehyun listened through the thin walls as heavy footsteps moved through the station. Freneth voices, speaking in their growling language, demanded access to various areas. They were searching for something, though their stated reason was routine inspection. At one point, the footsteps stopped outside his quarters. Daehyun held his breath, one hand gently covering Mirai's mouth to keep her quiet. The young Vreneth trembled but remained silent, understanding the danger on some instinctive level. The door opened. Someone entered the room. Daehyun heard items being moved, equipment checked. Then a voice, female and heavy with authority, spoke in accented English. Something was here recently. I can smell it. Genetic markers in the air. Another voice responded, younger and uncertain. The scanner shows nothing, Commander Surin. Just standard human habitation. Humans don't leave this particular scent, Surin said. But perhaps I'm wrong. These frontier stations often have poor ventilation. Old air recycling systems mixing odors. The footsteps moved away. The door closed. Daehyun and Mirai remained frozen for another hour before Jiwon's voice came through his communicator, barely a whisper. They're leaving. Stay hidden until I confirm they're gone. When Daehyun finally emerged, his muscles were cramped and his heart still racing. Jiwon stood in his doorway, her face grim. They were looking for something specific. Someone specific. That Commander Surin, she suspected something but couldn't prove it. She left a monitoring probe in the asteroid field. What does that mean? Daehyun asked. It means, Jiwon said heavily, that we're on borrowed time. They'll be watching now. Any unusual activity, any hint of what you're hiding, and they'll be back with enough force to tear this station apart. Daehyun looked at Mirai, who had curled up in her usual spot, exhausted from the stress. She looked so peaceful when sleeping, so innocent. It was hard to remember she belonged to the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We need a plan, he said quietly. A real plan. Because I'm not giving her up no matter what comes. Jiwon nodded slowly. Then we'd better figure out how to keep her safe. Because what comes next is going to be much worse than a patrol ship. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I see why you did this. She's special. Different. Maybe important in ways we don't understand yet. After Jiwon left, Daehyun sat beside Mirai and stroked her soft fur. She made a contented purring sound without waking. Outside his window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Vreneth Empire watched and waited. And somewhere in their ranks, Commander Surin wondered what she had almost found on this remote mining station. The countdown had begun. 3 months had passed since the patrol ship's visit. Mirai had continued growing, now standing nearly as tall as Daehyun's chest when on all 4 limbs. Her strength had increased dramatically, forcing them to be even more careful. She could bend steel with her bare hands now, and her claws could tear through most materials the station was built from. But despite her physical power, she remained gentle with Daehyun, always careful, always controlled. The monitoring probe in the asteroid field had become a constant source of anxiety. Daehyun and Jiwon knew it was recording everything, watching for any sign of unusual activity. They had managed to maintain normalcy, but it felt like living under a microscope. Then everything changed in a single moment of catastrophe. The reactor alarm shrieked through the station at 3 in the morning. Daehyun jolted awake, his engineering instincts immediately recognizing the pattern. Core containment failure, the most dangerous emergency possible on a space station. Without quick action, the reactor would breach and kill everyone aboard within minutes. He rushed from his quarters, forgetting in his panic to secure Mirai's hiding place. The corridors filled with panicked workers running toward evacuation points, but Daehyun ran the other direction, toward the reactor level. Someone had to manually override the failing systems, and he knew the station's layout better than anyone. The reactor room was chaos. Warning lights painted everything red. Steam and coolant leaked from cracked pipes. The containment field was flickering, barely holding back the destructive energies within. The automatic systems had failed completely. Manual intervention was the only option, but the radiation levels were already lethal. Daehyun pulled on a protective suit, knowing it would buy him minutes at best. He began working through the override sequence, his hands steady despite the certain knowledge that he was probably going to die. The containment field dropped another 10%. 5 minutes until breach, maybe less. Behind him, metal shrieked as something tore through the sealed reactor door. Daehyun spun around and saw Mireille forcing her way into the room. Her amber eyes were wide with fear, but she pushed forward anyway, ignoring the radiation that must have been causing her terrible pain. "No," Daehyun shouted. "Get out! You'll die in here." Mireille ignored him. She moved to the containment housing, her body already showing signs of radiation burns through her fur. The manual override required closing several physical breaches that the remote systems couldn't reach. Places too hot, too radioactive for anyone to access and survive. The young Vreneth plunged her hands into the superheated containment housing without hesitation. She pulled twisted metal back into place with raw strength, holding it steady despite the temperatures that would have melted human flesh instantly. Her face contorted in pain, but she didn't stop. Daehyun understood what she was trying to do. If Mireille could hold the breaches closed long enough, he could activate the emergency lockdown. It might work. It might save everyone, but it would probably kill both of them. He worked faster than he had ever worked in his life. Override codes, manual switches, physical locks. Each step took precious seconds while Mireille held the breaching containment in her bare hands. Burns covered her arms. Blood seeped from damaged tissue. But she didn't let go. Other workers had reached the reactor level now, drawn by the emergency. They stood in the doorway, stunned at the sight of the massive alien creature working alongside Daehyun to save them all. Some raised weapons. Others simply stared in shock. "Don't shoot!" Ji-won's voice cut through the confusion. She had followed the workers down. "She's trying to help. Everyone clear the corridor. Prepare for emergency lockdown." The final switch. Daehyun threw it with all his strength. The containment field stabilized immediately, glowing bright blue as backup power flooded the system. The reactor settled into safe mode, its dangerous fluctuations contained. They had done it. The station was safe. Mireille collapsed. The sustained exposure and physical trauma were too much even for her enhanced biology. Daehyun caught her as she fell, cradling her massive head in his lap. Her fur was burned, her hands damaged, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. The workers crowded around now, their initial shock giving way to confused questions. What was a Vreneth doing here? Why had she helped? How long had she been on the station? Ji-won tried to maintain order, but the secret was completely exposed now. There was no hiding Mireille anymore. Within hours, the emergency broadcast had reached beyond the station. Multiple ships picked up the signals. Word spread quickly through the frontier systems. A Vreneth cub, living with humans, performing acts of heroism. The story was too strange, too significant to ignore. The Vreneth Empire's response came within a week. A massive flagship, the Sovereign's Wrath, arrived at HFY 7 with an escort of smaller warships. The station's sensors identified the flagship's commander immediately. Empress Karen herself had come, the absolute ruler of the Vreneth sovereignty. Daehyun had been preparing for this moment, dreading it. Mireille had recovered from her injuries with surprising speed. Her advanced biology healing damage that would have crippled a human permanently. She stood beside him now as the Empress's shuttle docked, her posture protective despite her youth. Empress Karen was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. She stood over 2.5 meters tall, her silver-gray fur marked with battle scars that spoke of centuries of combat. Her bone ridges were fully developed, crowned with ceremonial metal that marked her rank. Her amber eyes, so similar to Mireille's, held the weight of absolute authority. The Empress moved through the station with a guard of elite warriors. Everyone cleared from her path. She stopped in front of Daehyun and Mireille, studying them both with an expression impossible to read. "That is my daughter," Karen said in perfect English, her voice deep and resonant. "The cub I ordered disposed of for being too weak. And yet here she stands, strong and healthy. You are the human who took her?" Daehyun forced himself to meet those terrible eyes. "I found her dying in an escape pod. I couldn't leave her like that." "You should have," Karen said coldly. "She is property of the Vreneth Empire. You have stolen Imperial blood. The penalty is death for you and everyone on this station." Mireille growled, a deep threatening sound that made the Empress's guards reach for their weapons. She positioned herself between Daehyun and her birth mother, her meaning clear. To reach him, they would have to go through her. Karin tilted her head, studying her daughter with new interest. She defends you. A lesser species. This is not Vreneth behavior. What have you done to her? I raised her, Daehyun said simply. I taught her that strength isn't just about fighting, that protecting others matters more than dominating them. I showed her kindness and she learned to show kindness back. The Empress circled them slowly, her movements predatory. Kindness, a weak concept. The strong survive by taking what they need. The weak perish. This is the law of nature, the foundation of our empire. Then your empire is wrong, Daehyun said. The guards tensed, but he continued. Mirai saved 47 lives during the reactor failure. She risked herself for others. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. Something flickered in Karin's eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition. She turned to her chief advisor, a male Vreneth named Hyunwoo who carried himself with quiet authority rare among his kind. The human invokes the right of salvage, Hyunwoo said before the Empress could speak. He found the cub abandoned with no identification. He preserved her life. Under galactic law, he has claim as guardian until she reaches maturity to choose for herself. Karin's lips pulled back from her teeth. I am the law. I decide what is permitted. Then make a decision that shows your strength, Daehyun said. Test Mirai, let her prove what she's become. If she fails by your standards, I'll accept your judgment. But if she succeeds, acknowledge my guardianship. The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sound like thunder. Bold, foolish, but bold, very well. Your pet will face one trial. Not the full Imperial tests that would kill her, but a single challenge. She must defeat a Rakor beast in combat. No weapons, no assistance. If she succeeds without being killed, I will consider your claim. But there's one condition, Daehyun added. She doesn't kill the beast, only defeats it. Proves she's strong enough to show mercy. The Empress's expression darkened. Victory without death is meaningless. It proves nothing. It proves everything, Daehyun insisted. Any warrior can kill. Only the truly strong can choose not to. Karin stared at him for a long moment, then looked at Mirai. The young Vreneth met her birth mother's gaze without fear, her body language protective and determined. The Empress saw something in that stance that made her reconsider. Agreed, Karin finally said. But when she fails, when the beast tears her apart because she hesitated to kill, you will watch. You will see the consequence of your weak philosophy. Then you will die knowing you led her to destruction. The arena was set up on the flagship within days. Daehyun was permitted to see Mirai before the trial. She pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of affection they had developed over the months together. You can do this, he told her quietly. Remember everything I taught you. Strength with control, power with purpose. You're not fighting to kill. You're fighting to prove what you are. Mirai chirped softly, her version of agreement. Then she walked into the arena alone. The Rakor beast was released from the opposite side. It was massive, twice Mirai's size, covered in armored plates and sporting claws like curved blades. It roared, a sound that echoed through the arena, and charged. The battle was brutal and desperate. Mirai used everything Daehyun had taught her, not about fighting, but about thinking. She used the environment, wearing the beast down, avoiding its charges, striking at weak points not to kill but to exhaust. The Rakor grew frustrated, then tired, then desperate. Finally, Mirai got behind it and locked her arms around its throat in a chokehold. Not crushing, not killing, but applying just enough pressure to cut off blood flow. The beast thrashed for nearly a minute before going limp, unconscious but alive. The arena fell silent. Mirai released the Rakor and stood over it, breathing hard, bloodied but victorious. She looked up at the viewing box where Karin sat, and the Empress saw in her daughter's eyes something she had never expected to find. Pride. 8 months had passed since Empress Karin granted Daehyun 1 year of guardianship. Those months had transformed their lives completely. The small maintenance engineer and his adopted Vreneth daughter had become wanderers, traveling the frontier systems in a battered transport ship they named the Morning Star. Mirai was nearly full-grown now, standing over 2 meters tall, her body powerful and graceful. Her midnight blue fur gleamed with health, and her amber eyes held intelligence that surprised everyone who met her. But what made her truly unusual was how she used her strength. While other Vreneth conquered and dominated, Mirai protected and defended. Word spread quickly through the frontier colonies. Stories of the gentle Fang, they called her. A Vreneth who stopped pirate raids without unnecessary killing, who rescued stranded miners from collapsed tunnels. who mediated disputes between rival settlements using reason instead of violence. Daehyun accompanied her everywhere, his presence a reminder that strength and compassion could coexist. They weren't alone anymore. Others had joined them, forming a small crew united by the belief that the galaxy needed protection more than conquest. Taejin had been a colonial marine before trauma left him unable to serve. He found purpose again working alongside Mirai, using his tactical knowledge to help her plan rescues and defensive operations. The former soldier was quiet, haunted by memories, but Mirai's gentle nature helped him heal in ways military medicine never could. Bora was a xenobiologist who had studied Vreneth society for years. She joined them out of pure scientific fascination, amazed by what Mirai had become. Her research suggested that Vreneth psychology was far more flexible than anyone had believed. They weren't inherently violent. They simply became what their culture demanded they become. Kyungmin was the youngest, barely 18. Daehyun and Mirai had saved his refugee transport from pirates 6 months ago. The young man was a genius with computer systems, capable of hacking through security that should have been impossible to breach. He idolized Mirai, seeing in her the hero he had always wanted to be. Jiwon had left HFY 7 to join them as well, taking early retirement from station management. Someone needed to keep this crew organized, she insisted, though everyone knew she had simply grown attached to the strange family they had built. Together, they took jobs that others wouldn't touch, dangerous rescues, humanitarian missions to forgotten colonies, disputes that needed mediation before they exploded into violence. The Morning Star became known across the frontier as a ship that helped those who had nowhere else to turn. But fame brought attention, and not all of it was welcome. The Purifiers were a Vreneth extremist group who viewed Mirai as an abomination. To them, she represented everything wrong with modern Vreneth society: soft, weak, corrupted by contact with lesser species. They believed she dishonored their entire race and needed to be eliminated as an example. Corporate interests also took notice. Several major companies saw potential in Mirai's unique psychology. If they could study her, replicate what made her different, they could create warriors who combined Vreneth strength with controllable behavior. Weapons that didn't question orders. Most dangerous of all were the rival imperial houses within the Vreneth sovereignty itself. If Mirai chose to claim her birthright, she would have legitimate standing to challenge for the throne. Her supporters would argue that her strength combined with wisdom made her superior to purely martial candidates. That made her a threat to established power structures. Assassination attempts became common. The crew of the Morning Star learned to expect attacks, sometimes multiple times per week. But Mirai's combat instincts combined with her learned intelligence made her almost impossible to kill. She could predict ambushes, counter traps, and disable attackers without killing them. Each failed attempt only added to her legend. Daehyun watched his daughter's fame grow with mixed feelings. He was proud of what she had become, the lives she had saved, the example she set, but he also worried about the future. The year granted by Empress Karen was almost over. Soon Mirai would have to make a choice about her place in the galaxy, and Daehyun feared his guidance wouldn't be enough for what was coming. They were sharing a quiet meal in the Morning Star's galley when Bora made a breakthrough. She had been researching Mirai's origins, trying to understand why she had been abandoned. The xenobiologist burst into the room with her tablet, her expression urgent. "I found something," Bora announced, "about why Mirai was left to die. It wasn't Empress Karen's decision." "Not really." She was pressured by her court advisors. They convinced her that Mirai was too small, too weak, that keeping her would show weakness in the imperial line. "Why does that matter now?" Taejin asked. "Because Karen has been watching us," Bora continued. "I hacked into some Vreneth communication networks. There are observers tracking our movements, reporting back to the Empress. She's been following Mirai's entire journey." Kyungmin took the tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. "Bora's right. These communication patterns are all flowing back to the flagship. But there's more. There's a reform movement within the Vreneth military. Warriors who are questioning the traditional brutal methods. They're using Mirai as their symbol, arguing that strength and compassion aren't mutually exclusive." Jiwon leaned back in her chair. "So Mirai isn't just herself anymore. She's become a political symbol. That makes her even more dangerous to established powers. As if summoning trouble with their conversation, The Morning Star's proximity alarms activated. A ship was approaching, broadcasting Vreneth military identification codes. But the message it sent was unexpected. "This is Commander Surin of the reformed Vreneth military. I request permission to board. I come alone and unarmed. I have information about threats to Mirai's life." Daehyun remembered that name. Surin was the warrior who had nearly discovered Mirai on Hazel 7, who had suspected something but couldn't prove it. He looked at Mirai, who tilted her head thoughtfully before making an approving chirp. They allowed Surin to dock. The Vreneth warrior who stepped aboard was battle-scarred and weary, her gray fur marked with old wounds. She carried no weapons and moved with careful respect, acknowledging Mirai with a formal bow that surprised everyone. "You honor me with your presence," Surin said in the Vreneth language. Mirai responded with a series of chirps and growls that Surin seemed to understand. The two communicated for several minutes while the crew watched in fascination. Finally, Surin switched to English for the others' benefit. "There is a coordinated attack being planned. Multiple factions have agreed to work together, just this once, to eliminate Mirai. The Purifiers, several corporate mercenary groups, and even some Imperial House assassins. They will strike within days." "How many?" Taejin asked, his military instincts taking over. "At least 50 ships," Surin said grimly. "Maybe more. They're planning to hit you at the Sejong 4 colony when you arrive to deliver medical supplies. The colony is isolated, far from any military support. They believe you'll be trapped." "Then we won't go," Jiwon said immediately. "We'll change course, avoid the trap." But Mirai made a negative growl, her body language firm. She looked at Daehyun and chirped insistently. He understood what she meant. The people at Sejong 4 needed help. 30,000 refugees living in desperate conditions, waiting for supplies that would keep them alive through the coming winter. If the Morning Star didn't arrive, hundreds would die. "She wants to go anyway," Daehyun translated quietly. "She knows it's a trap, but she won't abandon people who need her." Surin's expression shifted to something like respect. "That is why we follow her. Why many of us believe the Empire must change. True strength is protecting others, not crushing them." She paused. "I can bring 20 ships of reformed warriors. We will stand with you. But even with our help, 50 to 21 are poor odds." Taejin was already pulling up tactical displays, calculating possibilities. "We need a force multiplier. Something that changes the equation completely." Daehyun knew what they needed, but the thought made his stomach tight with anxiety. There was one power in the galaxy that could match 50 warships. One voice that could command respect even from multiple factions working together. But reaching out to her meant inviting scrutiny they might not survive. "I'm going to send a message to Empress Karen," he said slowly. "Tell her what's happening, what Mirai is about to do. If she has any pride in her daughter, any recognition of what she's become, maybe she'll help. And if she doesn't?" Jiwon asked. "Then we go anyway," Mirai's growl seemed to say. Daehyun smiled sadly and stroked her fur. The message was simple. Daehyun recorded it himself, speaking directly to the Empress. "Your daughter is about to face 50 warships to save 30,000 innocent lives. She could run. She could save herself. But that's not who she is. She's going to fight because people need her protection. I thought you should know what kind of air you cast aside. What kind of strength you missed because you only knew how to measure it in killing." The response came faster than expected. 3 words in Vreneth script that Bora translated, her voice shaking slightly. "We are coming." The crew of the Morning Star made their preparations. They checked weapons, planned tactics, said quiet goodbyes to each other just in case. Mirai moved among them, pressing her forehead against each person, sharing a moment of connection before the coming storm. Daehyun found her on the observation deck, staring at the stars. She made a soft, questioning chirp when he approached, and he understood. She was asking if he was afraid. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also proud. You're everything I hoped you would become. Everything I tried to teach you. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already proven that strength and kindness can change the galaxy." Mirai pressed her forehead against his, purring softly. In that moment, the massive predator became again the tiny cub he had found dying in the ice. His daughter. His purpose. His pride. Tomorrow they would face impossible odds. But tonight they were family, and that was enough. The colony world Sejong 4 appeared on the view screen like a wounded animal. Its atmosphere was thin, its surface scarred by failed terraforming attempts. 30,000 refugees lived there in prefabricated shelters, clinging to survival through sheer determination. They had been waiting weeks for the medical supplies aboard the Morning Star. Supplies that would mean the difference between life and death for hundreds of sick and injured colonists. But surrounding the planet was a fleet that made Daehyun's blood run cold. 53 ships according to their sensors. Pirates, mercenaries, and extremist vessels all working together for the first time in recorded history. Their goal was simple: destroy Mirai and anyone protecting her. The Morning Star hung at the edge of the system, accompanied by 20 ships of reformed Vrenith warriors led by Commander Surin. 21 vessels against 53. Suicide odds by any calculation, but the colonists below had no other hope. Daehyun stood on the bridge beside Mirai, watching the enemy fleet. His daughter had grown so much since that day he found her dying in the ice. She stood over 2 meters tall now, magnificent and powerful, her bone ridges gleaming with the bioelectric energy that marked combat-ready Vrenith. But there was no bloodlust in her amber eyes, only determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "We can still run," Jiwon said quietly from her station. "Jump out. Find another way to help the colony later." Mirai made a firm negative growl. She looked at Daehyun and he understood her meaning perfectly. Running meant abandoning people who needed them. That wasn't who they were. That wasn't what he had taught her to be. "We fight," Daehyun said simply. "Kyungmin, open all communication channels. Broadcast on every frequency." The young hacker's fingers danced across his console. "All channels open. Everyone in the system will hear this." Mirai stepped forward, her presence commanding even through a video feed. When she spoke, her voice was a carefully controlled growl that carried the weight of absolute conviction. She had been practicing speaking for months, and though her words were rough, they were clear. "I am Mirai, daughter of Empress Karen. These people below need help. Anyone who harms them will answer to me. But I offer choice. Those who leave now with honor, leave now. Those who stay will learn what true Vrenith strength means. Not conquest, protection." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then ships began breaking formation. 5 vessels turned and jumped away. Then 10 more. Some were pirates who hadn't signed up to fight Imperial blood. Others were mercenaries who realized the pay wasn't worth facing a legend. Within minutes, 15 ships had fled, but 38 remained. Their commander, a brutal pirate captain named Inhai, who had been exiled from Vrenith society for cowardice, broadcast his response with venom. "You are no true Vrenith. You are a pet, a curiosity, an abomination. Today we cleanse this stain from our honor." The remaining enemy fleet began its attack formation, but Daehyun had planned for this. The Morning Star wasn't built for direct combat. Its strength was in speed and adaptability. They dove toward the planet's massive asteroid ring, using the rock field for cover. "Taejin, coordinate with Surin's ships," Daehyun ordered. "Guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. We can't win a direct engagement, but we can bleed them." The battle began with a fury that lit up the darkness of space. The Morning Star weaved through asteroids, its shields flaring as enemy fire tracked them. Surin's reformed warriors engaged in coordinated strikes, disabling enemy ships with precision attacks. Mirai suited up in heavy boarding armor, preparing for the most dangerous part of the plan. "What you're about to do is insane," Jiwon told her. "You know that, right?" Mirai chirped what might have been agreement, then launched herself from the airlock. Her armor had limited thrusters, just enough to maneuver in zero gravity. She moved between ships like a predator hunting in 3 dimensions. Targeting enemy vessels one at a time, she would breach their hulls with her claws, enter through the damaged sections and systematically disable each ship's weapon systems from the inside, not killing crews unless absolutely necessary, just crippling their ability to fight. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Each boarding action risked her life. But Mirai fought with the efficiency of a master warrior combined with the restraint of someone who understood the value of mercy. On the planet's surface, Bora had taken a shuttle down with emergency medical supplies. She coordinated the colonists' evacuation to hardened shelters as debris from the space battle rained down through the atmosphere. Hundreds of lives depended on keeping the battle away from population centers. The Morning Star took heavy damage. Their shields failed after the first hour. Hull breaches opened in 3 sections. But Daehyun kept them moving, kept them fighting, his years of maintenance experience allowing him to jury-rig repairs that shouldn't have been possible. Kyungmin worked frantically, hacking enemy communication networks to create confusion. sending false orders, making the pirate fleet believe they were facing more ships than actually existed. His digital warfare sowed chaos in enemy ranks. Then everything changed. Space rippled with massive jump signatures. 4 Vreneth Imperial battleships arrived, led by the Sovereign's wrath. Empress Karen had come with enough firepower to level entire fleets. The pirate vessels immediately tried to scatter, but the Imperial ships moved with practiced coordination. They didn't destroy the fleeing enemies. Instead, they disabled them, capturing ships for later judgment. The message was clear. This wasn't just a battle. It was a statement about the future of Vreneth honor. Inhai's flagship tried to make a desperate run at the Morning Star, probably hoping to at least kill Mirai before being destroyed. But Mirai intercepted him in space, boarding his ship alone. The battle inside lasted only minutes. When she emerged, dragging the defeated pirate captain, she had proven once again that strength didn't require death. The space battle ended with startling speed once the Imperial ships arrived. 38 enemy vessels were captured or destroyed. Surin's reformed warriors had lost 3 ships but saved countless lives. The Morning Star drifted, heavily damaged but intact, its crew exhausted but alive. Empress Karen's shuttle docked with the Morning Star while repair crews worked to stabilize the battered ship. The massive Vreneth stepped onto the bridge, her presence filling the small space. She looked at the damaged consoles, the exhausted crew, the blood staining the floor from minor injuries. Then her eyes found Mirai. Mother and daughter faced each other in silence. Mirai's armor was scarred and broken, her fur matted with sweat and dried blood, but she stood tall, meeting her birth mother's gaze without fear. "You saved 30,000 lives today," Karen said in the Vreneth language. "You faced impossible odds. You could have run. Why didn't you?" Mirai responded in her rough, growling speech. "Because they needed me. Because protecting others is what strength means. Because my father taught me that the strong exist to shield the weak." Karen looked at Daehyun, who stood quietly beside his daughter. "You changed something fundamental in my daughter, human. The Empire does not forgive change easily." "Then maybe the Empire needs to change," Daehyun said simply. He was too tired for fear now. Maybe strength that only knows how to kill is actually weakness. Maybe real power comes from knowing when not to use force. The Empress was silent for a long time. Then, in a decision that would echo across Vreneth space for generations, she spoke in a voice meant for official record. "I declare Mirai the first shield of the sovereignty. She will have freedom to operate as she chooses, protecting and aiding those in need. She answers only to her conscience and her training." "But more than that," Karen continued, her voice softer, "I recognize my error. I cast aside a daughter for being different, not understanding that different can mean superior. The brutal trials that have defined our culture for centuries will be reformed. We will still value strength, but we will also value wisdom, compassion, and the courage to protect rather than dominate." She approached Mirai and did something no one had ever seen an empress do. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between equals. "You have become something I never imagined possible. Something better than what I am. I'm proud to call you my daughter." Mirai's response was a soft chirp, and she pressed her forehead against Karen's in the gesture Daehyun had taught her for showing affection. For a moment, the fierce warrior empress was simply a mother reconnecting with her child. Karen offered Daehyun honors and wealth, positions of power within the sovereignty structure, but he declined most of it. He accepted only resources enough to continue his work, to keep helping those who needed it. "I'm not a diplomat or a warrior," he told the Empress. "I'm just someone who fixed something that was broken. Mirai doesn't need me to be anything more than what I am." "You are wrong, human," Karen said, and there was something like warmth in her voice. "You are a father. That is the most important thing she needs." The months that followed became a new chapter. The Morning Star was repaired and upgraded with Vreneth technology. The crew expanded, bringing in more people who believed in their mission. Sejong 4 thrived with proper support, becoming a symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. Mirai's legend grew. The gentle Fang, they called her across 100 worlds, the warrior who protected rather than conquered. Young Vreneth began questioning their traditional training, asking why strength had to mean cruelty. Reform movements spread through the sovereignty, slowly but steadily changing a culture that had remained unchanged for centuries. Daehyun watched it all with quiet pride. His daughter was changing the galaxy, One rescue at a time, one act of mercy at a time. She had become exactly what he hoped she would be. Strong enough to fight, but wise enough to know when fighting wasn't the answer. They received a message from Commander Surin one evening. Another crisis. Another place where strength and compassion were needed. A mining colony trapped by corporate interests. Desperate people with nowhere to turn. Mirai looked at Daehyun with a questioning chirp. He smiled and nodded. Of course they would go. That was who they were now. That was what family meant. As the morning star prepared to jump, Daehyun stood at the observation window watching stars streak past. He thought about the day he found a dying cub in the ice, never imagining what she would become. He had simply done what felt right, what his sister would have wanted him to do. Save someone who needed saving. Mirai approached and rested her massive head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become their habit. Despite her size and power, she still sought comfort from the quiet maintenance engineer who taught her that protecting others was life's highest purpose. Ready for the next one? Daehyun asked quietly. Mirai purred in response, a deep rumbling sound of contentment and determination. Together, the galaxy's most loyal protector and the father who raised her. They jumped into the unknown. There would be more challenges, more people who needed help, more chances to prove that strength combined with compassion could light up the darkness of space. The human who raised an Empress Feline's neglected cub had changed the galaxy, not through conquest or force, but through simple kindness shown to someone everyone else had abandoned. And in doing so, he proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our capacity to see potential where others saw worthlessness, to nurture greatness through love, to choose compassion when cruelty would be easier, to believe that even the smallest act of kindness can echo across the stars and change everything. The galaxy's most loyal protector had been forged not in the brutal trials of the Vrenith Empire, but in the patient care of a lonely engineer who simply refused to let another helpless creature die. And that made all the difference.